In this video, I'm gonna show you how to play the Sly Cooper games on PC. That is the PS2 Trilogy and Sly 4 on the PS3. For that, we're gonna be using the PCSX2 and RPCS3, and all the games are running pretty great on them. Sly Cooper 4 can even run at 60 FPS here. And there is also a workaround for the sections in Sly 4 where you have to use the PlayStation motion controls. Other devices can go through that with what I'm about to show you. So let's get going. We'll begin by downloading the best PS2 emulator, PCSX2. The link will be down below on the fixed comment of this video. And here on the main page, you want to click here on latest nightly and then download the emulator for the operational system you're using. In my case, I have Windows, so this is where I'm gonna click here. The emulator will come as a zipped file, so you're gonna need either WinRAR or 7-zip to extract it. I would personally recommend 7-zip over WinRAR actually, and I created a folder called PS2 on the desktop of my computer, and now here on the file, I'm just gonna double click on it. It's gonna open with 7-zip, and now I'm just gonna extract all the contents here to the same folder where the original file was. You can go ahead and delete the original file. We're not gonna need this anymore. And here, before we start the actual installation, click here on View and make sure that file name extensions is enabled right here. This is required for what we are about to do right now. So before we start the actual installation of the emulator, you're gonna right click here on the folder, and then you're gonna select New, and then click on Text Document. This file will be generated, and you're gonna rename this file here to Portable, and on the .txt, you're gonna erase the txt and replace it with ini. Exactly like this. It has to be written exactly like this, and when you click away, it's going to ask if you really want to change this one, and then click on yes. And if you see this little gear here next to the program, it means you did it right. Now you're gonna click here on this PCSX2 executable, so just double click on it, and if you did it right, all these folders will show up right here, just like it was before, but this is something that they changed it on the latest version of this emulator. There's a few options here if you want to change the language and the theme of the emulator. I'm just gonna leave everything on default here, so go ahead and click on next. Here we're gonna have to select the folder to where the BIOS files are gonna be. I can't show here on the video where to go or even mention where you could find it because that's against YouTube's policy. But it shouldn't be too hard to find if you know what I mean. And when you have them with you, you're gonna place them on the BIOS folder here on the emulator folder, just like this. Now go back to the installation program here and then click on Refresh List. And like that, the BIOS should appear here. I got the Japanese version, but it really doesn't matter at the end of the day. This is not gonna affect the installation or anything like that. So now click here on Next, and on this tab, we're gonna have to select the folder to where you want the emulator to scan for the games. And in my case, I like creating a folder here on the emulator folder. Click on New and then Folder. I just create a new one here called Games, just to keep everything on the same place. Right now, go here back on the emulator and then click here on Add, and it should open the emulator folder by default. So now you just have to select that games folder that we just created and click on Select. It's going to ask if you want the emulator to scan this every time. Click on Yes, and there you go. The folder directory should appear right here. Now click on Next. And on this screen, we can configure our controller, and this emulator has a automatic mapping function. So if you already have your controller plugged in, you're gonna click here on automatic mapping, and it's going to list all the devices you are using. In my case, I have a Xbox controller, so I'm gonna click here on SDL0 X input controller, but you can use your keyboard as well if that's the case. You can configure this later inside the emulator, by the way. If you have a second controller, you just have to do the exact same thing here on controller port 2. Now, click here on Next, and with that, we have finished the installation of the emulator, and it should appear right here. This will be a good time to subscribe to the channel and also leave a like on this video. Now, with this part completed, we're gonna load the games into the emulator. And back on the emulator folder, on that games folder that we created before, this is where we're gonna be placing the games here. The most common format for this emulator is the .iso right here. And I can't show you here on the video where to go to get the games because this is against YouTube guideline and it can't get my video deleted if I do that. So you can either dump your copy of your game into the PC or find it online. Now, with all the games in this folder, you're gonna go back to the emulator, and if you had it open while doing this, you can just click here on scan for new games, and just like that the games will appear here. But if you had your emulator shut down, when you reopen it, the games will appear as well. Now, the emulator settings are pretty much the same for all three games, and because of that, we can save some time here. Instead of going into each game, we can set up the general emulator settings. Right here, where it says settings, you're gonna click on it. First, you're gonna click here on emulation. This window will show up, and the first setting I want you to enable here is enable CDVD pre-caching. This will reduce the loading times of all three games, and there's no downside for using it. There's only to gain here. Right here on the bottom, you're gonna click on optimal frame pacing. This will help a little bit to reduce the input lag of the emulator, but it's gonna use a bit more of your CPU and GPU. So if you notice a performance hit, like the games are not running at 60 FPS, you're gonna come back here and deactivate this option. Next, click here on the graphics tab, and right here where it says render, the best video render for this emulator is this one here, Vulkan. But if your GPU is a little outdated, Vulkan is not going to show up. If that's the case for you, the second best video renders in my opinion are Direct3D 11 or 12. On the bottom where it says adapter, this is the video card that you want the emulator to use. In this case, your main video card, if you have two on your setup. Now right here on display, where it says aspect ratio, you're going to change this one from auto to widescreen 16:9. This will force the widescreen display on the emulator, but we are not going to have a stretched screen. That is because later we're going to activate the custom patches of this emulator. Leave everything else on the default, and let's go here to the rendering tab. And here on internal resolution, we can increase the native resolution of the game on this emulator. You should select a resolution here that matches your monitor. In my case, I have a 1080p monitor, so the best setting for me would be 3x native, but you can increase this one even further if you want the emulator to render the game at 4K resolution, for example. It will render at that resolution, but it's going to be fit to your monitor, so the game will look even better. But of course, it's going to use a lot more of your CPU and GPU for that. And here on anisotropic filtering, you can change this one to 16x. This will make the game look much better, and it has minimal impact on performance. Also here on the post-processing, there is an option here to enable the FXAA sharpening anti-aliasing. This will make the image of the game look sharper, and you can play with this setting here. You just click on FXAA and you can change the sharpening percentage as well. Personally, I like using the FXAA, but only in certain games. And on the Sly Cooper games, I don't like turning this on, but that's gonna be up to you. And that's pretty much it here. You don't have to change anything else. Now click here on close. Now we have to activate the custom patches for each game, and we're gonna have to go through each one of them, or at least on the games that you wanna play. I'm gonna start with Sly Cooper 1 all the way to 3. So for that, you just have to right click here on the game and then select properties. This window will show up, which is very similar to the one that we were messing with before, but now we have this option here called patches, and these are the custom patches available for this game. And to activate them, you just simply have to click here on the box where it says enable, and there you go. Widescreen is self-explanatory. This will render the game at 16:9, but it will not stretch the game. And the no interlacing will get rid of not just the interlacing, but also the motion blur as well, which will give us better image fidelity. Now you just simply have to click here on close and do the same thing for Sly Cooper 2 and 3. Right click, go to patches, enable both of them, close, and now the third game as well, enable both of them, and there you go. Now all three games are fully configured for the emulator. Now we just have to go ahead and start the game, and for that you just have to double click. I'm gonna start here with Sly Cooper 1, gonna load it up, and if you want to go full screen, you can double click the screen with your mouse like this, or you can press Alt and Enter. Now let's move over to Sly Cooper 4 on the PS3 emulator. We'll begin by downloading RPCS3, the PS3 emulator. I'll put the link down below, and here on the main page, you just have to click here on the download button, and then you download the emulator for the operational system you're using. In my case, I'm using Windows, so I'm gonna click on this one and then place it on the folder of your preference on your PC. These are the recommended and minimal specs of the emulator, and it's ideal that your PC has at least the recommended specs here, especially on the CPU. This emulator is very demanding on that. The emulator will come in a zipped file, so you're gonna need either WinRAR or 7-zip to extract it, and I would personally recommend using 7-zip. I'll put the link of that on the description of the video, and when you install that right here on the file, you're gonna click on it with the right button and then select 7-zip here and click on extract here. And you can go ahead and delete the original one. We're not gonna need that anymore. And to begin, you just have to double click here on rpcs3.exe to start the installation, and here there's a few options if you want to create a desktop shortcut and stuff. I would not recommend using the dark theme yet, so I'm gonna turn this off, and then just click here on do not show again, and I have read the quick start guide, and then just select here on continue, and there you go, we have RPCS3 on our computer. First, we have to install the PS3 firmware on the emulator, and we can get that on the official Sony website. This is the place right here. The link will be down below, and on this page you want to scroll down here to the bottom a little bit, and where it says how to update PS3 system software, you want to click here on update using a computer, and then you just click on download PS3 update and place the file on the same emulator folder. If for some reason the download doesn't start when you click on it, then you have to click on it with the right button on your mouse and then select copy link address, and then paste the link on your browser and press enter. Then the download will start. Now back on the emulator folder, I already downloaded my firmware here. It is this file, the PS3 update. Now you want to go to the emulator, and right here click on file and click on install firmware. It should open the emulator folder by default, so now you just have to double click here on the PS3 update, and it will install the firmware on RPCS3. Click here and do not show again, and then click OK. And now it will install these PPU modules, but this shouldn't take long. And while you wait for it to finish, this will be a good time to subscribe to the channel and also leave a like on this video. I would really appreciate it. Now with the emulator in place, you're gonna go back to the folder where you first installed it, and you're gonna notice this folder here called games that was already created by the emulator. This is where we're gonna be dropping the game files right here, because this is the default folder that the emulator scanned for new games. Ideally, the game files should be inside a folder like this one, and inside you're gonna have files similar to this one right here. Ideally, you should dump your copy of your game into the PC to get these files, but you can also get them online. But this is something that I can't show you here on the video because it is against YouTube's guideline, and it can't get my video deleted if I were to do that. And with the files in place, you're gonna go back to the emulator. If you had it open while doing all of this, you're gonna click here on File and then click here on Add Games. It should open the emulator folder by default, so now you're gonna double click on the games folder and then select the game folder once and click here on Select Folder. Just like that, the game will appear here. You can also shut the emulator down and reopen. This will work as well. First, let's enable some of the custom patches that this emulator has for this game, and it's very simple. Right here on the game, click on it with the right button, then select here Manage Game Patches. This window will show up, and when you start it for the first time, it's going to ask you if you want to download the latest patches. Go ahead and click on Yes, and when you do so, the game will appear right here. So you can just click on this little arrow, and click again on the version of the game, and this is the single patch available for this game. If you are planning to increase the game's resolution to make it look better, we have to click here on Disable MLAA. But if that's something that you don't care about, or your PC can't handle a higher resolution, you don't have to change anything here. Now, go ahead and click here on Apply, and then Save. And now we're going to tweak the emulator settings for this game, and this is the most important part for playing this game on the PC. You're gonna click on the name again with the right button, But this time you're gonna click here on Create Custom Configuration. This window will show up. You don't have to change anything on CPU, so let's move over to GPU right here. And the best renderer for this emulator is this one right here, Vulkan. But if your GPU is a little outdated, you're only gonna have the OpenGL option, in which you can play the game, but the performance will be much worse. And there are cases where the game doesn't render the image properly when using this one. You just get a black screen whenever you start the game. So this one is not recommended unless you don't have Vulkan enabled. But if you do, go ahead and make sure that it's selected right here. Now on frame limit, you have to change this one from auto to 60 FPS. You can play this game at a frame rate higher than 60, but I would not recommend doing that because it will introduce a infinite loading screen issue and also the button inputs not being registered as they should. Now on anisotropic filter, you can change this one to 16x. This will make the game look much better and it has minimal impact on performance. And now for increasing the resolution of the game, right here on default resolution, you're not going to change here from the recommended, and instead you're gonna use the resolution scale right here. There are no issues in this game when you increase the internal resolution, but of course you need to have a powerful PC that can handle that, and also you must have enabled the disable MLAA option that I showed you before. In my case, I'm just gonna leave mine at 1080p. The game looks fine and plays fine, but of course if the game is lagging for you, come back here and change this option back to 100%, or you can reduce it even further. Here on additional settings, enable the multi-thread RSX. Now move over to the advanced tab, and right here on RSX FIFO accuracy, change this one to atomic. And this part is optional, but I like going here to the emulator tab and disable the show trophy pop-ups notification, PPO compilation hint, and shader compilation. That way we don't have any notifications popping on screen when we are playing the game. Now we are done here with these settings, so click on apply and then save custom configuration. And now we're going to configure the controller for this game. Right here on pads, click on it, and this emulator has a automatic mapping function. So if you don't have your controller plugged in, go ahead and do that right now. And right here on handlers, if you click here on keyboard, it will list the devices available for the automatic mapping. In my case, I'm using a Xbox controller, so if I click here on X input, it will do the automatic mapping for me. You can also play with a keyboard as well if that's what you want to do. It works just as fine here. And when you're done, go ahead and click here on save. Now I'm going to show you the motion controls workaround if you're not using a PlayStation controller. For doing that, we're going to be using this software here called DualShock 4 emulator. And even though this is the name, it also works for Xbox controllers and keyboards as well. That is how we're going to emulate the motion controls in Sly Cooper 4. So this link will be on the description somewhere. And right here on releases, you're just going to click on the latest release available right here. In my case, it is version 2.1. And on this page, you're just going to scroll down here a bit to the bottom. And you're going to click on the first name here, DS4 emulator portable.zip. So just click on this one, download it to your PC, and we're going to take it from there. The program is packed in a .zip file, so we have to extract it using either WinRAR or 7-zip, which you should be able to use by now. So I'm just going to go ahead and click on extract here to get the files right here. Go ahead and delete the original zip. We're not going to need this anymore. And to start it, first make sure that you do have your controller plugged in or your keyboard if that's what you want to do here. And you just have to double click here on ds4 emulator.exe, and just like that, the program is already working. In my case, it already detected the Xbox controller that I'm using, and here you have the instructions on how to use the touchpad or the motion controls in this case. For the Xbox controllers, the motion works by using the D-pad buttons on it. If you're going to play this with a keyboard, when you start the program, you're going to have different options here, of course, because it already detects the controller you're going to use anyway. And this program needs to be using when you are playing the game. So you just use this one when you get to the section of the game where you have to use that. And when you're through, you can come back here and just close this program if you don't want that running on your PC. Now we are ready to finally start the game. So let's go back to the emulator. and you just have to double click on the game to start. There's an option to install the digital manual. That's up to you. I'm gonna click on no, and then we're gonna have the game right here. And when you start this for the first time, it's going to compile these PPU modules, but this shouldn't take long. It's going to depend on how strong your CPU is, and you only have to do this once, of course. And to go full screen, you can either double click the screen with your mouse or press Alt and Enter on your keyboard. I have many tutorial videos like this on the channel, so if you like what you saw, don't forget to check out my other stuff, subscribe to the channel, and also leave a like on this video. Thank you for watching. I hope this was useful to you, and as always, I'll see you soon.